Welcome to Echoes of the Unknown, the podcast where we'll be exploring some of the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries. I'm Jack Montgomery, and today we're traveling back to 2008, where we'll revisit the disappearance of college student Brandon Swanson. It remains one of Minnesota's most perplexing missing persons cases. Brandon vanished during a phone call with his parents, leaving investigators and family members with more questions than answers. The case has become notable not just for its baffling nature, but also for the legislation it would later inspire. Brandon was born on January 30th, 1989, in the small city of Marshall, Minnesota, and he lived there his whole life. He graduated from Marshall High School in 2007 and chose to study wind turbines for a year at the Minnesota West Community and Technical College campus in nearby Canby. On May 13, 2008, classes at Minnesota West ended for the academic year. Brandon stayed in Canby for the evening to celebrate the end of the spring semester with some of his fellow students. At two different parties, he was witnessed drinking alcohol, but his friends said he didn't seem visibly intoxicated. Indeed, according to later police reports, he had only a couple of drinks, most likely not enough to be impaired. Shortly after midnight, Brandon got into his car and began his 30-mile drive home to Marshall. The landscape in southwestern Minnesota, with its vast fields and long stretches of empty road between small towns, would become crucial to understanding the events that followed. Around 1:15 a.m., Brandon's car ran off the road and into a ditch. Though neither he nor the vehicle was seriously damaged, the wheels were stuck. After unsuccessful attempts to reach friends for help, he called his parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, at 1:54 a.m. What followed was a 47-minute phone conversation that would become the last time anyone would hear from him. The call itself presents one of the case's most baffling elements. Brandon calmly gave his parents directions, believing he was near the town of Lind, which is only a 10-minute drive from Marshall. He described landmarks and distant lights, guiding his parents as they drove to find him. But when they arrived in Lind and tried to signal him with their headlights and horn, Brandon couldn't see or hear them. Nothing about his described location matched where his parents were. Growing frustrated with the situation, Brandon decided to walk toward the town lights he could see in the distance. The conversation ended abruptly around 2:30 a.m. when Brandon suddenly exclaimed, "Oh shit!" before the line went dead. His parents' repeated callback attempts went unanswered. They spent hours searching the area before finally reporting him missing to the Lynn Police Department at 6:30 a.m. Initially, the police were not particularly concerned, saying it was hardly unusual for young men that age to stay out all night after the last day of college classes. They suggested Brandon might have simply gone somewhere to cool down or sleep it off. Annette specifically recalled that one of the officers said it was her son's right to be missing. Later that morning, the Lind police did start a search, but they found no trace of Brandon in the town or outside. They then requested assistance from the office of Lyon County Sheriff Joel Dahl. To better focus the search, the sheriff's office obtained Brandon's cell phone records. The records revealed that he had been completely off course, about 25 miles from where he thought he was. He had actually been calling from the vicinity of the tiny town of Taunton along State Highway 68, the main route to Canby, which was northwest of Marshall. That discovery launched a more intensive search effort in that area. Deputies eventually found Brandon's abandoned car in a ditch off a remote gravel road outside of Taunton. The location was along the Lincoln County line a mile north of Highway 68, bringing the office of that county's sheriff, Jack Vizecki, into the investigation as well. He told the media that the Chevy Lumina had gotten hung up on the top of an incline at the edge of the road. Not seriously enough to damage the car, but enough to keep the wheels from touching the ground on that side. The car was empty, with his keys and cell phone missing, but there was nothing else found wrong with the vehicle. Unfortunately, due to the grass and gravel in the area surrounding it, there were no tracks and thus no way to tell what direction Brandon might have started walking. His cell phone call had been routed through a tower at the intersection of County Routes 3 and 10 near Minneota, another town along Highway 68. By May 15th, the call had been determined to have come from within 5 miles of the tower, so searchers began concentrating their efforts there. Since part of that circle included Yellow Medicine County to the north, authorities from that jurisdiction also took part. Sheriff Dahl noted that from the area, a red light atop a Taunton grain elevator could be seen. He thought that it was possible that the red light Brandon had seen had led him to believe Lynn was within walking distance. Ground searches were being complemented with a flyover by an aerial team. Search dogs were also brought in from the Twin Cities. A team of bloodhounds from nearby Codington County, South Dakota, picked up a 3-mile scent trail that largely followed the field roads west-northwest to the driveway of an abandoned farm. From there, the dogs left the driveway and roughly followed the Yellow Medicine River northwest, before the trail abruptly ended on a north-south gravel road near the county line. At one point, a bloodhound jumped into the river and exited, which was interpreted as possibly indicating that Brandon fell in, but then got out. Brandon had mentioned passing fences and hearing nearby water, his father recalled. On the theory that Brandon might have drowned, boats from the state's Department of Natural Resources were deployed along the river, and gates were installed. In some areas in Lincoln County, the water had been 10 feet deep on the morning of the disappearance, but had gone down since then, Dahl noted. Deputies also walked the river's banks, and horses and all-terrain vehicles were deployed in the surrounding area. However, Dahl ruled out a more organized, extensive ground search. After the original search found no sign of Brandon, most search efforts were temporarily discontinued. However, Sheriff Vizecki continued to walk the 2 miles of the Yellow Medicine in that area every day for 30 days. Searches resumed late that fall after fields planted shortly after the disappearance had been harvested. Dogs on those searches continued to follow scents of human remains into an area northwest of Porter that had not been searched earlier. Efforts picked up again in the spring, after snow melted but before planting, a cycle that continued through 2011. By that time, 122 square miles had been searched. In 2010, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension took over as lead agency on the case. It set up a tip line, and by 2015, 90 leads had been reported that way. By that point, when official searches resumed, the area of interest had moved towards Mud Creek, a tributary of the Yellow Medicine River north and northwest of Porter. For her part, Annette Swanson does not think her son drowned in the Yellow Medicine. On March 8, 2011, she said during a televised interview on CNN, "There really is nothing to indicate that he's in the river." Her husband Brian also recalls that, despite any alcohol his son had consumed earlier in the evening, he did not seem disoriented or confused during their phone conversations. Several theories about Brandon's disappearance have emerged over the years. The drowning hypothesis seems quite logical given where the trail ended, but the river's relatively shallow depth and extensive searches make this less likely. Investigators said they could not rule out the possibility of foul play. As Sheriff Vizecki himself once speculated, someone could have been in the shadows, and they got him that way. However, there was no concrete evidence of that, and the isolated location and lack of struggle evidence make this theory questionable. Environmental factors like hypothermia or exposure in the 40-degree weather could explain Brandon's disorientation, but they don't account for the complete absence of any physical evidence. After the searches, Annette Swanson was still struck by the initial response of the Lynn police that her son had a right to be missing when she told them how old he was. "I'm his mother and I knew something was horribly wrong," she recalled later. She and Brian began lobbying for changes in state law that would require an investigation into the case of a missing adult to begin as soon as it is reported, much as was already required in cases of possibly abducted children. Annette met with Marty Seifert, minority leader of the State House of Representatives at the time, whose district included Marshall. The two talked about the problems she had experienced with the police when she reported her son missing. She knew it wouldn't help in her son's case, but that it could help others in the future, Seifert recalled in 2015. Seifert introduced a bill called Brandon's Law that would amend the law governing the state's existing missing child program to change the word child to person. He recalled considerable resistance at first from the state's law enforcement community, but a companion bill was soon introduced in the state Senate, and it passed both houses in May 2009, including unanimously in the lower chamber. Then Governor Tim Pawlenty signed it into law, with the Swansons and their daughter Jasmine in attendance at the ceremony. The change in the state law also requires that police determine whether the missing person is potentially in dangerous circumstances. Furthermore, they must notify other nearby law enforcement agencies promptly. Brandon's law also clarified that the agency taking the report is the lead agency investigating the case, which is important since the absence of that distinction had created some problems in the later phases of the initial search for Brandon when 3 different counties were involved. Police were no longer allowed to refuse a report based on an initial belief that no criminal activity was involved, the brevity of the interval since the person was last seen, the possibility that the person may have intentionally disappeared, or the lack of a relationship between the missing person and whoever reported them missing. Brandon's Law went into effect at the beginning of July 2009, and at least 4 other states have since passed similar laws. Representative Seifert left the legislature in 2010, but he still has the pen the governor used to sign the bill into law. After its enactment, he said, "I consider it one of the most important bills I authored in my 14 years. It will save lives." As of today, the disappearance of Brandon Swanson is not officially classified as a cold case. After more than 17 years, the case remains open, and law enforcement continues to receive and follow up on tips. If you have any information that could prove helpful, no matter how seemingly inconsequential, please call the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office at 507-694-1664. Ever since Brandon's disappearance, the Swansons have left their porch light on all night, every night, as a symbol of their hope that their son would eventually return or be found. Brandon's final words in the circumstances of that night continue to perplex investigators and haunt his family. They also remind us that in our modern, connected world, people can still vanish without a trace, even while talking on the phone with loved ones trying to find them. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Echoes of the Unknown. If you found this story compelling, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with fellow mystery lovers. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, answers often come to those who keep asking the right questions.